There are so many things that make your local cashier absolutely furious. Things that would probably be a shock to you.
We all know those types of customers.
Can I speak to your manager?
Don't argue with me. Go call your manager.
Can I speak to your manager?
Let me talk to the manager.
I want to speak to your manager.
You know what? I'm gonna quit.
This is Employee Nightmares.
Personally, I have so many stories of the different types of customers I encounter, which kind of makes me wonder what kind of stories other jobs have to share. So, I asked them.
People are a lot more bolder on the phone than they are in person, but then as soon as they show up for their meal, they're like, "Hi, how are you?"
Working in retail is like hell, and you deal with some weird people, you know what I mean?
When you're working retail, like serving somebody food, they are just the meanest to you for absolutely no reason, really.
Each episode on this new series, I'll pick one worker to explain the most annoying things that happen on their regular day at work. Join me and my guests on this journey. My name is Natalie Kalnicki, and you're listening to Employee Nightmares. How's it going, guys? Today I'll be virtually interviewing RTA students, asking them all about their work life. Let's hear what they have to say.
I worked at Lowe's.
I used to work at a movie theater.
But I used to work at a grocery store.
I work at a pool. I'm a lifeguard, swim instructor, and aquafit instructor.
I used to work at Wendy's.
What's the weirdest encounter you've ever had at work?
I've had like a weird first date situation that I won't talk about again, but blood coming from somewhere that I won't talk about it.
And this guy with super long hair, he was smoking cigarettes, stood up and like leaned on the ticket booth and talked to me for a good 45 minutes about when he saw Star Wars in theaters for the first time.
I remember somebody was walking around the produce and they like picked up a bunch of tomatoes and stuff. I told him the price and I was like, it's like $25 because they got so many, like $25. And so every 2 seconds they're like, okay, take out another one.
2 ladies came into our drive-thru one time and they ordered like the whole menu. They just went, sat in the parking lot, and they ate all of it.
Have you ever encountered a Karen, if you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I did not encounter a Karen. I encountered the male equivalent.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yes.
Yes, like 50-year-old white guy.
There's been so many times when parents come in and they just want something that I just don't know how to give it to them.
As you can see, there are just so many stories that are waiting to be told. Listening to these different employees share their life at work just makes me so much more excited to explore this topic even more. My name is Natalie Kalnicki, and I'm here with Mary, a fellow retail employee. Mary has a ton of work stories, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, have you ever had any weird encounters at work that really stand out to you?
A lady and her friend come up in a minivan. We're expecting a small order because it's literally 1 a.m, and she literally comes and she orders the whole menu. Anyways, so she comes to the window. Her total is literally well over $100, which is insane for fast food. But she comes up and I'm pretty sure she was not of a sober conscience because her car smelled like garbage. Like, it smelled like she was definitely doing something in there, and we saw some empty bottles, and she just kind of went into the parking lot, and she ate her whole meal there.
What are some of your work pet peeves, things that customers do that really trigger you?
I don't like it when I tell a customer what they don't want to hear, and they blame it on me as if it's my fault. They don't want to hear it, and they just go off on you, and it's like, ma'am, these are not my rules. These are just the company's rules that I'm following. I am just a crew member.
Have you ever thought to yourself, that's it, I'm gonna quit today?
Yes, I had many of those moments. One time that comes to mind is when someone got mad at me because I told them that their chicken sandwich was gonna take a minute to cook because they wanted their chicken fresh out of the fryer. And I was like, if you want that, it's gonna take at least 6 minutes for the chicken to cook. And he just threw a fit. He was like screaming in my face, telling me that's not what he wanted. I can't believe you would do this. I want to stay here. I should stay here. There's no cars behind me right now. Meanwhile, I have a headset on. I can hear cars coming to the speaker. And I'm like, sir, if you look in your rear view mirror, you will see that there are cars coming. That's my thing. When customers yell at me, I'm like, I can't do this. I gotta quit.
Now, speaking of times where you wanted to quit, how do you deal with stress when you're at work?
For me, it's actually just talking to people. That's what really calms me down, especially when I feel they because you talk to them and they'll make you feel justified in your actions. They're not going to be like, oh, you were so reacting. They'll be like, oh my God, that customer is such an asshole. And I'm like, yeah, girl, I thought so too. And then I basically like calm down and it's all good. But if not, I just go to the freezer and I just calm down with a cool air.
Or just go to the freezer and just cry. Yeah, definitely done that before.
We don't want to embarrass. It's happened a couple of times.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. Mary, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your work stories. I am sure that everyone else listening to this podcast loved your stories just as much as I did. So up until this point in the podcast, we've heard many stories from different retail employees. I thought now it's time I tell you my stories. Without further ado, I present to you things cashiers hate. Number 5. Customers who don't say hi back. Now, I already have bad social anxiety as is, and customers not saying hi back just adds on to that anxiety. And that moment will stick with me for the rest of the day, and I'll just keep thinking about it over and over and over, and it's just not cool. So please take 0.5 seconds out of your day and say that 2-letter, 1-syllable word, and trust me, it'll make your cashiers whole day, week, month, and year. Number 4. Now this one is not necessarily something that is annoying, it's more funny than annoying. I can't tell you how many times I'd be minding my own business, putting returns away on the shelf, and suddenly a customer would just poke their head around me, stare at me, then stare at my chest area, and I'm like, can I help you? And they go, do you work here? Now, I love it when this happens because it's like, no, ma'am, I model the uniforms, walk around looking cute doing it, and it's just like, yes, ma'am, I work here. Number 3. This next one is personally one of my biggest pet peeves at work, and that is when customers come into the express lane with a whole shopping cart full of items. Now, I understand why they'd want to come the lane, like it moves faster, there's fewer people, but it just causes a headache for everyone. Like, there's a reason why we're only allowed 12 items. Customers behind you will start getting mad and complain, I would get in trouble, so just make everyone happy and go to the normal lanes that allow more than 12 items. Number 2. I'm sure every cashier can relate to this one, and that is, I don't control the prices. There have been so many times where customers will yell at me, call me names, and be like, why are the bananas so expensive? Your store's a ripoff. And I'm like, I'm just a cashier trying to do my job. If you have a problem with the prices, you gotta talk to like the CEO of the company, not me. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it. Number 1. The number one thing that all cashiers hate is customers who ask to speak to the manager. Now, this pet peeve was actually the whole inspiration behind this podcast. Karens would come in asking for something that I just don't know how to give to them, and they start yelling at me, everyone's looking, they belittle me, and it's just so embarrassing and so inhumane, and it sets the mood for the rest of the day. So please, don't be that customer. This was not to single anyone out or make them feel bad. Think of this as an informative segment of things what not to do in front of your cashier. Now, I can't wrap up this podcast without answering the number one question that I ask every single one of my interviewees. And that is, what was my weirdest encounter at work? So, here's mine. One time, this older man came into my lane, and I noticed he had like a shit ton of cucumbers in his cart and a 250ml bottle of mustard. And so I asked him how many cucumbers he has, because I didn't want to scan it one by one individually. So he looks at me and says, 72. And I'm like, okay. So I type in the quantity and scan it once, whatever. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I like starting a conversation with my customers and talking with them. So I asked him, what are you going to do with all these cucumbers? Because who buys 72 cucumbers and a 250ml bottle of mustard? I know right now you are just as curious as I was. I wanted to know. I had to know. He looks me dead in the eyes and says, I plan on making a salad. This was my favorite encounter because it has every element of a story. It's funny, it's weird, it has suspense, so who knows if he actually went home that night and made a salad. The point is, these types of encounters make the workplace more enjoyable. Well, there you have it. Retail workers share their weird encounters, work pet peeves, and their biggest work struggles. Thanks for tuning in on this podcast. Until next time, my name is Natalie Kalnicki, and you're listening to Employee Nightmares.
This is Employee Nightmares.